thud, an envelope hit the dining table. Inside were a few thin receipts instead of cash. That morning, on our anniversary, I opened the fridge. Cold air and the smell of leftover rice filled the room. He said, "I'm saving for us, you know." But that day, those words just sounded cruel. I endured, I broke down, and in a moment of foolish anger, I did something I can never take back. I tried to have my stingy husband beaten up. Why I went that far, let me tell you everything. You're listening to Silver Story Tree, where the voices of life's late chapters gently bloom again. Subscribe, like, and turn on the bell to hear more heartfelt stories that grow with time. As I wiped the frost from my window, I heard the sound of stiff paper hitting the mailbox. The wind felt unusually cold that day, seeping through the cracks of my front door. When I opened the mailbox, an unfamiliar registered envelope touched my hand. There was no sender, only a receipt number stamped on it. Inside the house, I opened the envelope. It contained credit card statements and receipt copies. At first, I thought there must be some mistake. But looking closer, I saw they were receipts from my husband's credit card. Department stores, expensive restaurants, and even hotels I'd never heard of. I felt my breath catch in my throat. My husband Kim Young-chul and I had lived frugally for over 40 years. He always emphasized saving money, and I had followed his guidance throughout our marriage. Even when our boiler broke down, we endured winter with thick blankets rather than getting it fixed. When my herniated disc worsened, he told me not to visit expensive hospitals. I had always complied with his insistence that we live within our means. But these receipts painted a completely different picture. Meals costing over 100,000 won, luxury, wallet purchases, and hotel accommodation charges every weekend. My hands trembled. All those cold winter nights, all the pain I'd endured to save on medication. Costs, it all came rushing back at once. I sat at the dining table, with the receipts spread out in front of me for a long time. Outside, raindrops began to fall. The tap against the window seemed to amplify the anger growing inside me. Our home's boiler remained unfixed with no timeline for repair. Yet my husband had been spending warm nights in hotel beds. I picked up the phone and put it down several times. I didn't know where to begin. It felt like 40 years of marriage had turned into a lie in an instant. The receipts in my hand were cold, but my face burned hot. I married my husband when I was 23. Back then, Young-chul was a diligent young man, preparing for the civil service exam. I remembered how he would bring me small bouquets of flowers. Despite his difficult circumstances, when had he started living this double life? How many lies had accumulated without my knowledge? Through the window, I could see the raindrops growing heavier. On rainy days, my husband would always come out with an umbrella to meet me. But now I wondered if even that had been done out of obligation. I could only hear the loud ticking of the living room clock. It was almost quitting time. Soon my husband would return. I heard the key turning in the lock. I hurriedly put the receipts in a drawer. I wanted to pretend I knew nothing for now. I needed more evidence before I could properly confront this situation. That was shaking the foundation of our 40-year marriage. My husband entered with his usual smile. Now even that smile looked different to me. What secrets was he hiding? My hands trembled as I prepared our ordinary dinner. He boasted, as always, about how he'd saved money by eating only ramen for lunch, because the regular meal was too expensive. As I listened, I felt something breaking inside me. I couldn't sleep that night. Lying beside my peacefully sleeping husband, tears rolled down my face. For 40 years, I had endured everything for our family. But what kind of life had my husband been living all this time? What had all that saving and patience been for? Only the sound of rain tapping against the window answered my sorrow that night. When morning came, my eyes were swollen. My reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. My husband had left for work early as usual, and I sat alone at the table drinking cold coffee. Outside, yesterday's rain had stopped and sunshine streamed in. But darkness still filled my heart. Who had sent that envelope from the mailbox? At first, I thought it might be someone's prank. But the dates and amounts on the receipts were too specific. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. I decided to look through my husband's drawers. My hands trembled. In 40 years, I'd never searched through someone else's belongings. In his suit pocket, I found a memo with a phone number I didn't recognize. Deep in his drawer was another credit card, not a family card in my name, but an entirely separate one. I felt my heart sink. I wanted to check my husband's phone out of anxiety, but he always kept it password protected. Before, I thought it was because of company confidentiality, but now it took on a different meaning. That afternoon, I gathered my courage and went to the bank. I wanted to check the transaction history of the joint account I shared with my husband. I wanted to know how the money we had saved together for 40 years had been moved. The bank clerk kindly printed out the statement for me. My hands trembled as I scanned the records. Large amounts were being withdrawn regularly every month. The recipient was someone named Kim Mi Young, a name I'd never heard before. Records showed 2 million won, transferred monthly for the past 3 years, without fail. My legs felt weak as I headed home. On the bus, I looked out the window and thought about the past 3 years. During that time, I had endured worsening back pain. Because hospital bills were too expensive, I walked long distances to save on bus fares. My husband always said we needed to save for our retirement. Those words now stung like thorns in my heart. Leaning my head against the bus window, scenes from the past flashed before me. The day my husband became a civil servant and we celebrated the first paycheck he brought home and the future we dreamed of together, the family photo we took when our daughter was born. All those memories now seemed suspect. Where had my husband's heart been during those times? When I arrived home, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mrs. Choi from next door holding kimchi. Seeing my unusual expression, she asked what was wrong. Suddenly, tears burst forth. Mrs. Choi silently took my hand. Over a cup of tea, we talked. Mrs. Choi said she had a similar experience 10 years ago, when she discovered her husband's affair. She told me how she gathered evidence and consulted a lawyer. Following Mrs. Choi's advice, I decided to collect more evidence. Acting rashly out of emotion could turn 40 years of marriage into nothing. I needed to learn more about my husband's activities. That evening, when my husband returned from work, I tried to act normal. But my hands kept trembling during dinner. My husband asked with concern what was wrong. I made an excuse about having a headache. That night, while my husband was in the shower, I wanted to check his phone. But I didn't know the password. Instead, I checked his wallet. There was another credit card I didn't recognize. On the back was a small note, Mi Young's birthday, April 10th. In that moment, a chill ran through my body. Kim Mi Young, and her birthday. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together. I quickly put the wallet back in its place when I heard the bathroom door opening. My heart was pounding. That night, listening to my husband's snoring, I wondered what I should do next. The moonlight through the window felt cold. The person lying next to me, with whom I had shared half my life, had become a stranger. That night, once again, I cried myself to sleep. After breakfast, as soon as my husband left for work, I headed to his study. It was a space I rarely entered. Dust had gathered on the bookshelf. When I opened the filing cabinet, I found neatly classified documents. My husband had always been meticulous. When I opened the bottom drawer, an unfamiliar envelope caught my eye. Inside was a property contract for an apartment in the upscale Gangnam area. The contractor was Kim Young-chul, my husband's name, but the resident was listed as Kim Mi Young. The date showed it was from 3 years ago, coinciding with when the bank transfers had begun. My head spun. Had my husband provided an apartment for another woman? Or was there another reason? My hands trembled. I took photos of the documents. I needed evidence. Sitting in a nearby cafe, I tried to organize my thoughts. Through the window, I could see people hurrying by, each carrying their own stories. Sipping warm tea, I planned my next move. Following Mrs. Choi's advice, I decided to meet with a lawyer. At the law firm, a young female attorney greeted me kindly. After listening calmly to my story, she advised that I needed more evidence. Specifically, she suggested I check out the apartment in person and record conversations with my husband. On my way home, my phone rang. It was my daughter Sujin, saying she would visit this weekend. My feelings suddenly became complicated. How would I explain this situation to her? I decided not to tell her yet, not until I had definitive proof. The next day, I went to the address of that Gangnam apartment. Standing in front of the luxury complex, my legs trembled. Was my husband really housing another woman here? Gathering my courage, I asked at the security office. When I said I was looking for Kim Mi-young, the guard told me she lived in apartment 1403. Taking the elevator to the 14th floor, my heart nearly burst as I stood in front of apartment 1403. Hesitating whether to ring the bell, I instead pressed my ear to the door. I could hear a child laughing inside. Just then, the door of the neighboring apartment opened, and a middle-aged woman emerged. I asked her about Kim Mi-young. Her answer shocked me. Kim Mi-young wasn't a young woman but a woman in her mid-60s. And she had moved in 3 years ago. The child's laughter I heard was her granddaughter. I was confused. The situation seemed different from the affair I had imagined. But questions remained. Why had my husband provided an apartment for another woman without telling me? And why was he sending such a large sum of money, 2 million won monthly? On my way home, a thought suddenly occurred to me. My husband's mother. Her name was Kim Mi-young. But my mother-in-law had passed away 10 years ago. The mystery deepened. That evening, when my husband returned from work, I behaved differently. During dinner, I brought up the subject of his mother. His expression momentarily hardened. Then I asked if he knew anyone else with the same name as his mother. My husband hesitated briefly before changing the subject, saying it was nothing. That night, after my husband fell asleep, I wanted to check his phone again. This time, I tried some passwords. His mother's birthday. No. Our wedding anniversary. Wrong again. Finally, I entered the date from that memo 0410. Surprisingly, the phone unlocked. I opened his messages. There was a number saved under the name, Mi-young. The most recent message was from a week ago. Father, Jisoo has a recital this weekend. Please come if you have time. Father? And who was Jisoo? The next message was similar. Father, are you taking your medicine properly? Don't skip it like last time. It sounded like messages a daughter would send to her father. When I opened the photo gallery, an even bigger shock awaited. There were several pictures of my husband with a woman in her late 20s. And a girl who looked like an elementary school student. They looked like a family. I could hardly breathe. Did my husband have another family? In my confusion, I put down the phone and gathered my thoughts. Then I returned to the message inbox to look for older conversations. In a message from 3 years ago, I found a decisive clue. Father, thank you so much. Jisoo and I can now live stably thanks to you. If Mother were alive, she would have been very happy. At that moment, a memory flashed through my mind. In the early days of our marriage, my husband had mentioned an ex-girlfriend with whom he had briefly lost contact. Could he have had a child with that girlfriend? And was this, Mi-young, that child? I held onto this thought all night. The starlight visible through my window felt unusually cold. The secret my husband had kept for 40 years, I felt I had finally grasped a thread of it. And following this thread might completely change my life. When morning came, I made a decision. Today I needed to find out everything for certain. After my husband left for work, I headed back to that apartment. This time, I decided to meet them in person. I rang the doorbell of apartment 1403 on the 14th floor. My heart was pounding. The door opened and a woman in her early 30s appeared. It was the woman from the photos. She looked at me questioningly. She asked who I was. With a trembling voice, I answered I was Kim Young-chol's wife. Her expression immediately hardened. After a moment's hesitation, she invited me inside. I sat in her neatly arranged living room. On the wall hung pictures of my husband, this woman, and a young girl. It looked like another family. The woman brought tea and quietly said her name was Kim Mi-young. And that she was Kim Young-chol's daughter. A shiver ran through my body. His daughter? How could that be? Mi-young slowly began her story. Her mother had been my husband's first love, she said. They met in college and became intimate, eventually resulting in pregnancy. But Mi-young's maternal grandfather strongly objected to their relationship. Eventually, the couple separated, and Mi-young's mother raised her alone. Her mother never told Mi-young who her father was. She only said he was a good person. Then 3 years ago, her mother passed away from a serious illness. Only on her deathbed did she reveal the name of Mi Young's father, Kim Young-chul. Following her mother's last wish, Mi Young sought out Kim Young-chul. At first, he didn't believe it. But a DNA test confirmed their father-daughter relationship. From that point on, my husband began helping Mi Young and her daughter Jisoo. He provided an apartment and sent monthly living expenses. As I listened to the story, I felt dizzy. My husband's past and the daughter he had lived without knowing for 30 years. That was the secret he had kept. Not an affair, but another family. Mi Young tearfully apologized. She said she never intended to trouble our family. She just wanted to know her roots and meet her father. She asked for my understanding, saying she was sorry for my unexpected visit. And the shock it must have caused. My legs trembled as I made my way home. On the bus, looking out the window, I reflected on recent years. The nights my husband claimed to be working overtime. The weekends when he suddenly had urgent matters. During those times, he had been meeting Mi Young and Jisoo. Complex emotions washed over me. I was angry, but I also felt sorry for Mi Young. She was a victim too. A daughter who grew up without a father for 30 years. And a husband who learned the truth late in life. Everyone was in a difficult situation. When I arrived home, unexpectedly, my husband had returned early. He was sitting on the living room sofa, lost in thought. He slowly stood up when he saw me. His gaze was different, as if he knew everything. We looked at each other in silence. Then my husband spoke first. He said Mi Young had called him today. She told him about my visit. With a deep sigh, he said he wanted to tell me everything. Sitting at the living room table, my husband began his story from the beginning. His first love in college and the news of her pregnancy. But her father strongly opposed their relationship. And she suddenly cut off contact. Afterward, my husband met me and we married. He never mentioned his first love, it was a past wound. 3 years ago, Mi Young suddenly appeared. At first, he didn't believe it, but the DNA test results shocked him. Only then did he understand why his first love had disappeared so suddenly. She had given birth to and raised their child alone. My husband tearfully apologized. He was truly sorry for keeping it from me. But he couldn't turn his back on a daughter he hadn't known about for 30 years. Especially since Mi Young was in difficult circumstances. He couldn't help but provide assistance. As I listened to his story, various emotions crossed my mind. Betrayal, anger, confusion. But also understanding. What would I have done in his situation? And Mi Young and Jisoo were certainly innocent. Why did you insist on saving money while buying an apartment for them? I asked. My husband bowed his head. He said he thought our daughter Soojin was already independent. And the two of us didn't need much money. Meanwhile, Mi Young had suddenly lost her mother. And was struggling with her young daughter. He felt he needed to help her. Outside, the sunset was visible. Looking at the reddening sky. I wondered what to do next, how to accept this situation. In this moment when 40 years of marriage was shaken, I was deeply confused. I couldn't sleep all night. My husband said he would sleep in the guest room, leaving me alone in bed staring at the ceiling. The streetlight outside occasionally flickered through the window. Like my wavering heart. When morning came, I made a decision. I needed to meet Mi Young and Jisoo once more. This time, not out of anger, but to understand. Without telling my husband, I returned to that apartment. When I rang the doorbell, the same woman opened the door. She seemed surprised to see me but soon greeted me with a warm smile. This time, a little girl was with her. It was Jisoo. She looked at me with curious eyes. Sitting in the living room drinking tea, we talked. Mi Young told me about her mother. Despite raising Mi Young alone and living a hard life, she never spoke badly of her father. Rather, she said he was a good person. And gave Mi Young hope that they would meet someday. Just before her mother's death, Mi Young learned her father's name. After months of deliberation, she finally gathered the courage to seek out my husband. At first, he was very surprised and confused, but after seeing the DNA test results, he embraced Mi Young with tears. Mother always told me not to resent my father. She said it was her choice. Mi Young's words made my heart ache. The woman who raised a child alone for 30 years and Mi Young, who grew up without a father. What had their lives been like? Jisoo approached and showed me a drawing she was holding. It was a family picture. There was her mom, Jisoo, and a man labeled grandfather. Looking at the drawing, I felt a strange emotion. My husband was a grandfather to this child. Mi sincerely apologized. She said she didn't want to cause confusion in our family, but she wanted to meet her father and let Jisoo know she had a grandfather. She had waited 30 years for her father. Before my mother passed away, her last words were, "When you meet your father, please send him my regards." Tears welled up at Mi words. A woman who loved one man her entire life, and the daughter born from that love. Their story suddenly touched my heart. On my way home, I sat on a park bench deep in thought. Under the clear sky, I watched children playing. Suddenly, I remembered when our daughter Soojin was young. My husband had always been a good father. Despite his busy schedule, he never missed Soojin's sports days or presentations. To think that he had lived for 30 years without knowing he had another daughter. When I returned home in the evening, my husband was preparing dinner in the kitchen, something he rarely did. He smiled awkwardly when he saw me. On the table were my favorite dishes. During the meal, my husband spoke, "Whatever decision you make, I'll respect it. I'm truly sorry." His voice carried sincerity. In our 40 years together, I had never seen him so broken. "I met Mi again," I said. My husband looked surprised. "And Jisoo too. She's a beautiful child." Tears welled up in my husband's eyes at my words. "Jisoo. She really resembles Soojin when she was young," my husband said in a trembling voice. "When I first saw her, it was like time had gone backward." After dinner, we sat side by side on the living room sofa and talked. My husband said he felt he needed to help Mi, a daughter who grew up without a father for 30 years and who had suddenly lost her mother as well. He couldn't turn his back on her. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. My husband let out a deep sigh. "I was afraid. Afraid you might leave me. And afraid of hurting you." His words evoked mixed feelings. He said he hid it out of consideration for me. But in the end, he caused even greater pain. When Mi first came to me, I couldn't believe it. But after seeing the DNA test results, only then did I understand why she suddenly disappeared 30 years ago. She had given birth to and raised our child alone. Regret filled my husband's voice. Outside, stars shone in the night sky. A thought suddenly occurred to me. Mi and Jisoo, could they become part of our family? I surprised myself thinking of new possibilities in this situation. That had completely shaken 40 years of marriage. That night, as I got ready for bed, I reflected. Amidst the complex emotions of anger, betrayal, understanding, and compassion, one thing was certain: the victims in all this were Mi and Jisoo. They were born and raised in circumstances they couldn't choose. Moonlight streamed through the window onto the bed. In that soft light, I was gradually finding peace in my heart. Perhaps this was a new beginning given to our family. After breakfast, I sat across from my husband. It was time to talk seriously. In my heart, there was still anger and hurt, but also compassion for Mi and Jisoo. They were clearly victims of this situation. "What will you do now?" I asked. My husband took a deep breath. He said he wanted to continue helping Mi and Jisoo. He wanted to make up for the 30 years of lost time. "But your feelings are most important. If you don't want this." As my husband spoke, I fell into thought. The options available to me in this situation ran through my mind. The autumn sky visible through the window was clear. The falling leaves seemed somehow similar to my heart, shaking. Falling, yet preparing for a new season. Suddenly, I made up my mind. I want to invite Mi and Jisoo to our house. My husband looked surprised at my words. "Really?" he asked incredulously. I slowly nodded. Anger and hurt alone wouldn't solve anything. That afternoon, my husband contacted Mi. He invited her to our home this weekend. After hanging up, he said, "Thank you. Thank you so much." Tears welled in his eyes. When the weekend came, I cleaned the house and prepared food. I made several side dishes, showcasing skills I hadn't used in a long time. It was like preparing for family during a holiday. It felt strange but also exciting. My heart raced at the sound of the doorbell. Opening the door, I found Mi and Jisoo standing there. Mi looked nervous, while Jisoo curiously looked around. My husband greeted them with an awkward smile. We sat in the living room, and I served the refreshments I had prepared. At first, an awkward silence fell. Then Jisoo spoke, "Grandmother's house is so pretty." We all burst out laughing at her words. The awkwardness began to melt away. Mi-young carefully said, "Thank you so much for inviting us." Actually, I was very worried. I smiled and replied, "I thought a lot about it too. But now I understand. We're all victims of this situation." As we talked, I learned more about Mi-young. She was an elementary school teacher who loved teaching children. Jisoo was learning piano and had a recital next month. As I listened to their everyday stories, I began to feel closer to them. At mealtime, we all sat at the table and shared the food. Watching Jisoo enjoy the galbijjim I had made, I felt a strange emotion. Perhaps this child was like my grandchild in some way. After the meal, my husband suggested we look at family albums. We took out old albums and looked through them together. Photos of our daughter Soojin when she was young, family vacation pictures. Mi-young looked at those photos with curious eyes. "She looks like Aunt," Jisoo said, pointing to a childhood photo of Soojin. We all smiled at her words. Indeed, Soojin and Mi-young resembled each other. They were sisters who shared the same father. A thought occurred to me then. Should we tell Soojin about this? I exchanged glances with my husband. He nodded. It seemed we would need to tell Soojin the truth someday. As evening fell, Mi-young and Jisoo got up to leave. As I saw them off at the door, I asked, "Can I come to Jisoo's recital next week?" Tears welled in Mi-young's eyes. She nodded and expressed her gratitude. After they left, my husband and I sat in the living room. A strange peace flowed between us. "Are you okay?" my husband carefully asked. I smiled and answered, "Yes, better than I expected." They could become part of our family. That night, as I got ready for bed, I thought life is so unpredictable. Who would have thought such a change would come to our couple? Who had lived ordinarily for 40 years? But now it seemed we needed to accept this change and create a new form of family. The following week, I attended Jisoo's piano recital. My husband, Mi-young, and I sat side by side listening to Jisoo's performance. Watching her press the keys with her small hands, a warm feeling blossomed in my heart. In some sense, this child was also my family. After the recital, I presented Jisoo with a bouquet. She smiled brightly and hugged me. "Thank you, grandmother." At her words, tears welled in my eyes. I never knew the word, grandmother, could feel so warm. On our way home, I walked hand in hand with my husband. The autumn breeze blew gently. "No regrets?" my husband asked. After a moment's thought, I answered, "No, actually I'm glad. Glad to have met Mi-young and Jisoo." My husband squeezed my hand at my words. That night, I called Soojin. I asked her to come home next weekend. I said we had something important to tell her. It was time to face all the truth. A new chapter of our family story was beginning. Saturday morning, when Soojin was due to arrive, I tried to calm my nerves by tidying the house. Opening the living room windows, a crisp autumn breeze came in. My husband seemed restless from the morning. He looked worried about how to explain everything to our daughter. At the sound of the doorbell, we looked at each other. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Soojin stood there with a bright smile. In her mid-30s, our daughter was still beautiful and vibrant. "Mom, Dad, what's the important matter?" Soojin asked curiously. My husband and I exchanged glances. We sat in the living room. As I brought coffee, I gathered courage to start the conversation. "Soojin, there's something I need to tell you," my husband said in a trembling voice. "Dad has another daughter besides you." At those words, Soojin's expression hardened. Silence fell for a moment. My husband slowly began the story about Mi-young, his first love in college, and the daughter he discovered only 3 years ago. Soojin listened silently. I could read confusion and shock in her expression. "So, I have a half-sister?" Soojin finally spoke. My husband nodded. "Her name is Mi-young. She's 3 years older than you. And she has a daughter named Jisoo, your niece." Tears welled in Soojin's eyes. "Why are you telling me only now? How long have you known?" Her voice carried hurt. My husband let out a deep sigh. "I only found out 3 years ago. Dad didn't know it all before then." I took Soojin's hand. At first, Mom was very hurt too. But after meeting Mi Young and Jisoo, I realized they're also victims of this situation. And I think they could become part of our family. Soojin fell into thought. Have you met them? I nodded. We even went to Jisoo's piano recital last week. She's really a beautiful and kind child. She reminded me of you when you were young. My husband brought out the photo album. He showed photos from last week's recital and from when we invited them to our home. Soojin looked at those photos with curious eyes. Sister Mi Young. She resembles me. Soojin pointed to Mi Young in the photo. Indeed, the two had similar eyes. They were sisters who shared their father's blood. I want to meet them, Soojin said with determination. My husband and I looked at each other in surprise. We hadn't expected her to accept so quickly. Really? My husband carefully asked. Soojin nodded. Yes, what's happened has already happened. And I want to meet my sister once. Jisoo too. That afternoon, we contacted Mi Young. We told her Soojin wanted to meet them. Mi Young also seemed surprised but gladly agreed to the meeting. We decided to all meet at our house the next evening. Sunday evening, the whole family gathered. At first, an awkward silence fell. Soojin and Mi Young seemed to carefully examine each other. Then Jisoo approached Soojin and asked, "Are you really my aunt?" The question made everyone laugh. During dinner together, the conversation gradually became more natural. Soojin and Mi Young shared stories from their childhoods. They had many things in common. Both loved reading books and had an interest in music. I always wished I had siblings, Soojin said. Being an only child was sometimes lonely. Mi Young nodded. Me too. Living just with my mother, I sometimes wished for a larger family. After dinner, we sat in the living room looking at photo albums together. Soojin's childhood, Mi Young's growth process. Two separate family stories were now coming together as one. Let's meet often, Soojin said to Mi Young. I may have found out late. But I want to become close with you from now on, sister. Tears welled in Mi Young's eyes. She nodded and took Soojin's hand. That night, after everyone had left, my husband and I sat side by side on the living room sofa. A strange peace flowed between us. It went better than expected, I said. My husband nodded. I didn't expect Soojin to be so understanding. The next day, Soojin called. She said she had talked with sister Mi Young. They had planned to go shopping together at the mall next weekend. Hearing that warmed my heart. It felt like our family was forming anew. A month later, we all gathered for Jisoo's birthday party. Our living room was decorated with balloons and colored paper. Jisoo ran around excitedly with the doll Aunt Soojin had given her. Mi Young and Soojin were chatting and laughing like old friends. As I prepared the cake in the kitchen, I looked out the window. I could see trees with beautiful autumn colors. Like the changing seasons, our family was also changing. It had been painful and confusing at first. But now it was becoming solid again in a new form. My husband entered the kitchen and put his arm around my shoulders. Thank you, he said. Without you, this outcome wouldn't have been possible. I smiled and replied, it's the effort of all of us. And this isn't an end but a new beginning. Jisoo called me from the living room. Grandmother, the cake. Hearing that voice warmed my heart. Now I was a grandmother with 2 daughters and a granddaughter. Life is so unpredictable, but sometimes those unpredictable changes bring greater happiness. On the day of winter's first snow, I sat by the window knitting. Occasionally looking at the falling snow, I reflected on the past 6 months. The shock and anger when I first received that envelope. And now the peace settled in my heart. Life is truly unpredictable. Suddenly the phone rang. It was Mi Young. She said Jisoo was participating in a school presentation tomorrow. We had all planned to sit in the family section. After hanging up, I checked the calendar. Now my calendar contained important schedules for our entire family. When my husband returned from work, a warm dinner was waiting. We had decided to break away from our habits of extreme saving and frugality, choosing to live more comfortably. My husband's expression had brightened. Now that he no longer had to live hiding 2 families. Mi Young called. Jisoo has a presentation tomorrow, I said. My husband nodded with a bright smile. I've already marked it on my schedule. I arranged to leave work early. I smiled at his words. Now we could share all schedules without hiding. After dinner, as we watched TV in the living room, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found Sujin standing there. It was a surprise visit. Mom, Dad, surprised? Sujin said with a broad smile. She was holding a small gift box. Sitting in the living room, we opened Sujin's gift. It was a picture frame. Inside was a photo of our entire family taken last month. Me and my husband, Sujin, Mi Young, and Jisoo. It was an image of our newly formed family. What do you think? It's our family photo, Sujin said. Tears welled in my eyes. 6 months ago, this was unimaginable. Compared to that time when I was filled with anger and betrayal. The current peace felt like a miracle. It's really beautiful, my husband said in a trembling voice. Tears had formed in his eyes too. Sujin smiled and said, Mi Young got the same frame. We are one family now. That night, Sujin decided to stay over. I was excited to spend time with my daughter after so long. Before bedtime, Sujin asked me, Mom, are you really okay? Honestly, it must have been very difficult at first. I fell into thought for a moment. Then I answered sincerely, it was really hard at first. It felt like 40 years had turned into a lie. But gradually I realized, this wasn't anyone's fault. And meeting Mi Young and Jisoo, I felt they could become part of our family too. Sujin firmly held my hand. Mom, you're really amazing. I don't think I could have accepted it so easily. I smiled and replied, it wasn't easy. But life sometimes throws situations we can't choose. What's important is how we accept those situations. The next day, the whole family gathered at Jisoo's presentation venue. Me, my husband, Sujin, and Mi Young sat side by side. When Jisoo came on stage and began her piano performance, all our eyes filled with pride. After the presentation, we all went out for a meal. Sitting around the table, we laughed and talked. I suddenly thought this is the meaning of family. Beyond relationships tied by blood, understanding and accepting each other. And creating new memories together. As Christmas approached, we all decided to gather at our house. A large tree was set up in the living room. And gifts prepared by each person were placed underneath. Jisoo was excited to help decorate the tree. Watching her, I thought new vitality is flowing in our home. On Christmas Eve, the whole family gathered for dinner. The table was laden with abundant dishes. My husband proposed a toast to our family's health and happiness. Everyone clinked glasses. In that moment, deep gratitude welled up in my heart. After dinner, it was time to exchange gifts. Jisoo approached me with a small box. Grandmother, I made it myself. Opening the box, I found a handmade brooch inside. It was heart-shaped. I felt deeply moved. I also presented a gift to my husband. It was a scarf I had knitted myself. He wrapped it around his neck with a touched expression. Thank you. It's really warm. His words carried multiple meanings. Not just the warmth of the scarf, but the warmth of our relationship. Late in the night, sitting on the living room sofa, I watched the snow falling outside. My husband sat beside me. No regrets? He quietly asked. I smiled and answered, no. Rather, I'm thankful. Through all this, we gained a larger family. Looking back, the day that envelope appeared in the mailbox was a major turning point in my life. Initially filled with shock, betrayal, and anger, over time it transformed into understanding, forgiveness, and a new beginning. When spring came, flowers began to bloom in our garden. On weekends, Mi Young and Jisoo would visit, sometimes joined by Sujin. Sitting on the garden bench, watching them laugh and talk, I thought life is truly mysterious. Sometimes the darkest moments bring the brightest light. That night, I opened my diary and wrote a few lines. To love is sometimes to forgive. And forgiveness makes new beginnings possible. 6 months ago, my life seemed to collapse. But now I have gained a larger family, deeper understanding, and stronger love. That day when the envelope appeared in the mailbox, God gave me not a trial but a gift. I closed the diary and looked outside. Stars twinkled in the sky. Gentle breathing sounds came from the bedroom where my husband slept. Now our secret was no longer a secret. And that truth, rather than tearing us apart, had bound us more firmly together. Life is truly unpredictable. But in that unpredictable journey, we sometimes discover unexpected happiness. All that time led me here, and now I no longer dwell on past wounds, but look to present happiness and future possibilities. Under the starlight visible through the window, I offered a prayer of gratitude. For overcoming all trials and knowing greater love. And above all, for giving me a heart that can forgive. That was the greatest wisdom I had learned in 40 years of marriage. The truth that true love means understanding, forgiving, and growing together. Everyone, have you ever lost yourself in misunderstanding and anger, like I did? Through this experience, I learned that love isn't proven by words, but by understanding and trust. I endured, I regretted, and only then could I see the truth in his heart. It may be late, but it's never too late to be warm again. Please share your own experiences and thoughts in the comments. Your story might comfort someone else. If this story touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you subscribed and liked the video. And if someone you know needs to hear this, please share it with them. Thank you. May your day be peaceful and full of warmth.